Okay, so welcome to a video that is for all the people who love to fish the trout magnet. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're an extreme bait finesse guy like myself, or if you fish with spinning tackle or even spin cast gear, or it doesn't matter if you fish the trout magnet like it was intended to be fished, which is under one of their floats, or if you fish it floatless like I do. And that's because I found a quality, cheap micro finesse jig head to replace the stock jig heads that come with the trout magnet kits. Now, here are some examples of the jig heads that you get with your trout magnet kits. And if you take a close look at one of these jig heads, you'll see that they're not very detailed. And they're kind of an odd shape, kind of unnatural looking to me, but I'm sure they designed it this way for a reason, probably to impart some kind of action when fishing it under a float. And there's actually nothing wrong with this jig head. They work very well. But if you're one of the guys who fish a trout magnet without using one of their floats, like myself, these jig heads kind of leave you wanting a little bit more. Now, here in America, we actually have quite a few options when it comes to, I guess, micro finesse jig heads, and I'm holding a few of them right here. But for the most part, these are not really compatible to use with a trout magnet. And let's take a look at some of them here. Here's one of the smaller options. Kind of looks like a fish head. Here's another very realistic option. I think you can find these at Walmart. And here are a couple of other options. I think these are from Bass Pro Shops. But a lot of times with these American micro finesse jig heads, either the hook gauge is too thick, or as you can see with these examples, they have these little attachments. I guess these are supposed to be bait holders, that if you look at a trout magnet body, you can see, it's going to be pretty hard to push this little body over these two big hook-like appendages on this particular jig head. Now, I have successfully put this jig head on a trout magnet, but it looked very unnatural. It stretched the plastic out, and with this one it was the same thing, and I think the gauge of the hook might be a little bit too thick. But in either event, let me show you the jig head I found on AliExpress. Now, enter the Swolfie aging jig head, and let me let you guys take a good look at this jig head. As you can see, it's very detailed. It's got two very realistic eyes that I guess appear to be looking backwards or down. It's got this, I guess, lip under here. But when I first saw this jig head on AliExpress, I immediately thought that they were selling this jig head right here, which are DAIWA Gekabidgen aging jig heads. And you can see I have a whole pack of them, and I mean, they look very, very similar. Now, of course, they're not going to match the quality of the DAIWA jig heads, but these DAIWA jig heads, when you compare the quantity against these Swolfies, they cost over 2.5 times more money. Plus, with these Swolfie jig heads, you're not afraid to get hung up and break off and lose the jig head, since they're so cheap. Now, here's a great thing about these Swolfie jig heads from AliExpress, is that they come in 3 sizes that I know of so far. Now, this is the 1 gram size. Now, here's the 1.7 gram size, or 1/16 of an ounce. And this is kind of funny, but here is a 3.5 gram size, or about 1/8 of an ounce. Now, if you look closely, you'll see that even though the head sizes may be different, the hook size is the same. And let me show you what they look like rigged up onto some trout magnets. Now, here's a standard trout magnet with the trout magnet jig head. Here's another one. Now, here's the trout magnet when rigged up with the Swolfie jig head, the 1 gram one. Looks to be a perfect fit. and it's definitely a lot more realistic to a fish to see those eyes there versus, I guess, this generic shaped one from Trout Magnet. Let's see if I can hold these two at the same time. You can definitely see the difference there. Now what's funny is that I'm going to show you guys what these bigger jig heads look like on the Trout Magnet. Here's the 1/16 ounce. As you can see, the hook fits perfectly. Now the jig head is disproportionately big compared to the body, but I'm going to be testing this to see if that scares fish away. And then here is the 1/8 ounce jig head with the Trout Magnet body. As you can see, the hook fits perfectly, but the head is just massive. And I'm going to be testing this as well to see if this oddly disproportionate head size compared to the body scares fish away. Now, we've seen that the Swolfie jig heads do look a lot more natural versus the stock Trout Magnet jig heads, but in order to show you the biggest benefit of these Swolfie jig heads, at least in my opinion, over the stock jig heads, I pulled the scale out. Alright, so the standard Trout Magnet with a Trout Magnet jig head weighs right around 1 gram. Now in order to cast this, even with, I guess, spinning and spin cast gear, you need a really light powered rod. But if you're an extreme bait finesse guy like me, you're gonna need not only that extremely light powered rod, but a very capable bait finesse reel to be able to cast 1 gram a fishable distance. Alright, so here's the Swolfie jig head Trout Magnet, and this weighs 1.21, so 0.2 of a gram heavier than the stock Trout Magnet. Now for those of you guys who are thinking, 0.2 of a gram is not going to matter, you'd be dead wrong. Even 1/10 of a gram is going to matter when you're casting lures this light. Not only will you gain probably at least 5 to 8 feet of distance depending on your setup, but you also gain way more accuracy, and it's a lot more natural and easier to fish the Trout Magnet when it's got some extra weight to the jig head. As I showed you guys in this little mini casting montage. Now the setup I was using was the 22 ALDEBARAN BFS. I think it was 2-pound mono and my Salty Stage bait finesse prototype rod that's like 5'5" with the moderate action. So here's the Trout Magnet with the second biggest jig head. You're looking at 2 grams. So do you know how far you can cast 2 grams with the 22 ALDEBARAN BFS or any current modern bait finesse reel? You would probably double the distance that you would get out of a stock Trout Magnet, at least. And then of course, the Trout Magnet with the big old 3.5 gram head, you're looking at almost 4 grams. So the benefit to this is if you're fishing deep lakes or a deep pocket in a river or creek, since the Trout Magnet now weighs almost 4 grams, it's going to sink down to the bottom and not get carried away by fast flowing water, and you can also use heavier line like 4-pound. Plus, with today's current bait finesse setups, you could probably bomb this well over 100 feet, which I'm going to be testing out in Colorado this summer. Okay, so as you can see by those fish catches I showed you, that these jig heads are pretty stout. Even that super hard fighting Mayan cichlid that I caught at the end couldn't bend out the light wire hook on this 1 gram jig head model that I was fishing with a trout magnet. And just to show you guys what I caught the crappie with, it was the 16th ounce jig head with a crappie magnet. Looks like a perfect fit. Now I was kind of worried that the hook would be too small, but you know, the big crappie just swallowed it right up, no problem, and these hooks are really sharp as well. So basically you just kind of lean into the hook set and they didn't get off. Now since I discovered these jig heads, the trout magnet is not going to be the only micro soft plastic I'm going to be fishing it with. I'm going to be pairing it up with some of these lures as well. These little micro swim baits right here, these are from Japan. Should be killer for trout in Colorado. Here's a lure that should be killer for trout. There's another color. I don't think they're quite small enough for these little insect lures. I haven't found a jig head that will fit them yet, but yeah, with these Swolfie jig heads, it's going to open up a whole new realm of fishability and castability when it comes to trout magnets, panfish magnets, any super small microplastic. And if you're interested in these jig heads, I'm going to leave a link in the description on where I got them. I think they're like, for a pack of 10, they're like $3 and under, which is a bargain considering what I spent on lesser jig heads at Bass Pro Shops. So there we go guys, just a quick video review of a better, affordable, quality micro jig head for the trout magnet. Alright guys, thanks a lot.